Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome to Cellar Door Skeptics. We are live on Spreaker, and be prepared because chances are this is going to be an explicit tag show. I won't tell you and start off the show specifically with F-bombs and R-bombs and S-bombs and whatever that you can think of.
What about Jaeger bombs?
We are going to do that because this episode 56, we are live again on Spreaker. You can chat with us in the chat room, but this episode 56, special election coverage for 2016, the night of, is sponsored by Jägermeister, the alcohol that makes you feel good, even though your candidate may not win tonight. Come on, Hannah. Where's the laughter to that?
I'm just scared.
You can be scared all
I
you
need
want.
something to take the edge off. Let's take the edge off.
We're going to take the edge off. So, on the count of three, everybody listening, get your Jaeger bombs ready. 1, 2, 3.
Clink.
There you go.
That tastes like democracy.
It does. It does. And tonight we have an amazing, and there you go, Hannah. I'm already starting. We have an amazing episode planned for you, right? But it's not really even planned because the whole episode is going to be covering election night.
With some rants.
With some rants. We are. And we have a special guest we're going to bring on in just a second, a friend of ours that said, hey, you know what? I wrote a blog last year. I got some information for you. I want to join the conversation tonight. And we're like, you know what? We would love more people to talk with us. So sometimes I get sick of listening to Hannah talk about how much he wishes Bernie was still here.
I miss Bernie.
He does. He was crying earlier. You know, my daughters are comforting him. It's okay, Uncle Chris. You're gonna get a female president now. And he's still talking about Bernie. But in all fairness, we are going to talk a little bit about our friend's blog from last year. We're going to talk about Nate Silver, 538 election website. We're going to talk about voter fraud.
Or the lack thereof.
And I have to cover marijuana legalization because it's just a staple of my fucking show. There's explicit one. And I just can't help myself. And so while you're all sitting there watching the election coverage, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to watch it right on my TV, right next to our studio here. And we're going to watch the whole thing and talk about it while we watch it and update aggressively. But without any further ado, we have a wonderful friend. And it's funny because Hannah used to do a show with this gentleman. I don't know, I think it was about a year and a half ago. They had their own little show. And he's appeared on the show a couple of different times. He's a psychology major. He has all sorts of degrees that none of us have. and he thought, hey, I can join this show, talk about humanism, and how I can help you afterwards, because he's got something to sell you. Because we're all going to need therapy after tonight. So
I know.
Without any further ado, please welcome our friend David Teachout to the show. How are you doing tonight, sir? Oop, hold on a second there. Hold on. And welcome David Teachout to the show.
Round 2.
Fantastic. I'm doing really great. I'm here with you two, and I've got a beer in hand, so we're doing good.
And it's not a tiny one. You've got a giant monstrosity of a beer.
I've got, this thing is, oh dear. I do believe I went, 36 ounce. So
you went in and said, I want the biggest damn one you got.
Yep.
So,
and the darker the better.
So before we get too far, David, why don't you give everybody just a really quick 2-minute, high-level, 1 million fucking foot view of yourself? And I'm sorry, Hannah and I've already started drinking. He's been here since 7:30. the F-bombs are going to come because I'm watching the red fill in and I'm having a hard
so
time.
much. Oh my
I'm
God.
having a harder time here than I thought I would. So, but
Oh,
David,
don't worry about the Reds. We're still looking at East Coast South coming in, so I'm not really worried yet. But like you were saying, name is David Teachout. Used to do a show with Hannah. Had a really good time with that. Left it in order to spend some more time finishing up all sorts of different degrees. But I just started a new private practice as a therapist in this. And having recently just finished a degree in mental health psychology, and also have a master's in forensic psych. So I love everything that has to do with the human mind and how we come to make decisions and live our lives.
And maybe you could tell us then why people want to vote for Trump, because we don't understand it.
Oh, there's a lot of things. I think we were talking about before the show. I mean, yeah, there's a race issue, but to be perfectly honest, I don't really like boiling any decision down to one variable. People are just too complicated for that. Even when people are saying, well, if even somebody came out explicitly saying, we need to make sure that this is a whiter country. I'm still gonna, which there are people out there who say it.
And
I'm
Coulter?
still gonna be asking, yeah. Oh, geez, that stupid tweet of hers earlier. Oh man, she got roundly mocked for that, and for good reason. No, I'm still gonna ask the question of what do they even mean by that? How does this actually work for them? Because I hazard a guess that we're not talking like Tory conservative white people here. We're talking a very different type of breed almost, and what that means is going to be very different than the wealthy white person who's already in power. So there's always a little bit more nuance to find out.
Well, of course. I mean, that's one of the things that we always talk about here is you can't break anything down into one thing. That's the whole point of being skeptical, is trying to find more than, one line. We're not binary. Everything isn't black or white. And this two-party political mess that we call our presidential election seems to go that way pretty hard. And I've talked with people about the people that are angry. They've been promised the American dream, and they don't think they're getting it. And I mean, I'm a blue collar. Last week I worked over 80 hours. I understand I'm pissed. I don't get the right kind of healthcare coverage. I didn't get as much money as I thought I would getting out of my college programs and getting my degree and all that. I know people are upset, and I'm doing decent. There are a lot of people that are really not doing well, and they're not like these angry racist KKK nut jobs that are supporting Donald Trump. But they were told that if they went and they worked hard enough, they got a degree, or if they learned a skill and they just put effort and time to it, that they could have the American dream too. And they're not getting it, and they're mad.
Nope.
But their anger is being directed in the wrong direction, is what most of us would argue on the progressive side. Like, we shouldn't be mad at immigrants. We shouldn't be mad at, the little guy. We need to pay attention to what's happening as far as political corruption and money and finance and, people that are cheating in the system and stuff. That's what we argue as progressives usually, that we need to change the way the system is to benefit people. And it just seems like there's a disconnect is why we can't figure out why these people are angry and kind of direct it into a progressive, helpful manner, as opposed to ostracizing and alienating different groups of people.
Yep. Well, and we also have to keep in mind that, anytime I ever hear the term establishment, my first question is always, and how did they get established? I mean, it's not like these people just came out of the womb immediately empowered with money, power, and having been elected. We have elections. And unless somebody wants to sit there and claim some kind of 100-year-old vast Illuminati type of conspiracy, everybody got into office via the people who voiced their opinion by vote. So the establishment is there, yes, by utilizing the power schemes that we have established in this country, but also by the fact that they keep bloody well getting voted into office. When you've got some 80 to 90% incumbency rating, they don't have to work real hard. When you've got less than 60% of the populace voting, guess what? You can ignore the 40% of the populace who sits at home, rants on their blogs, and doesn't vote.
Or they work 80 hours a week and they can't get to the poll.
Exactly. Well, and that's just it. I mean, you do have that other issue where people are so damn busy that they can't get out the vote. And so we try to make it as easy as possible, but there's definitely some more things that could be done about it. Not least of which is, same day registration to, open voting times.
A national holiday.
Yeah.
Heck yes.
Well, what's funny, so I'm technically not a manager at my organization, but I do have employees that are reporting up through me. And that conversation came up. I actually had an employee who just started in May, and she stopped me. And she said, hey, I got to be honest with you. My other company didn't allow this. I need to know ahead of time. And I was like, well, I would hope you wouldn't call in. I will give you whatever time you need to go vote. And she's like, really? And I was like, yes. I was like, this is your one free pass. As long as you don't abuse it, don't tell me you're going to go at 8 and show up at like 2 in the afternoon, right? But, I mean, I understand the voting process, and I had the luxury a little bit, and this is my privilege showing, and we could talk a little bit about privilege here in a second, but my privilege shows because on my side, I'm on salary. I'm able to go in a little bit later. I'm able to go. I was there when the polls opened 10 minutes after they opened this morning, and I was able to do that because I could flex my schedule. I moved my meetings past 9 o'clock, so I didn't have to worry about being late for work, and she didn't have that. And when we had that conversation, I was like, you know what? I'll tell you what. For me, personally, it's more important that you go out and vote, even if you vote against what I feel, just for the fact that you're going to go out and utilize and exercise your right. Now, we could talk about, and maybe this is a discussion for later, whether people should vote or not vote, whether we should start mandating votes, and how we should go about this to engage people more. Because right now, what is the big thing people are talking about? How much they hate both the fucking candidates. And I'll be honest, I'm not big Hillary Clinton fan. And we could talk about who we voted for if we want later. But I could tell you that, my first vote would have been for Bernie, period. Now that's not, we can't get to that. We don't get to move into this any longer. Bernie's not an option, in my opinion. He didn't run independent. And so for me, I don't get that. I don't get to do any of these different things that I would prefer to do with Bernie. So I got to find somebody else that fits my moral standings, fits where I'm going to see the country move, and how fast I want it to move. And for her, it was just about being able to go to the vote. So if we talk about Manzell's pyramid, all she wants to do is go vote. I'm up here like I've already got this. And how much of the country doesn't get that same option? How fucking unfair is that? Hannah, you own your own business. In all fairness, you have the ability to go vote at any time of the day based on how you regulate your schedule. People don't have that. And why is that? Why would we not want to change society? If we think this is important, why would we force people to have to deal with work schedules, long lines at polls, to go give their opinion? If we don't fucking want their opinion, then let's just be honest and say, we don't want an opinion. And that's my biggest qualm, in my opinion, at this point in the election, is that we're almost so short-sighted here that it feels like people are going to give up faster than they're going to go out and vote.
Mm-hmm. No, that's exactly right. I mean, I think in part of it, I think is that kind of sunk cost kind of thing. There's almost more energy put into railing against what can't be done than there is in what can be. And so you've got so much invested essentially in saying, well, both parties are horrible. Everybody's disgusting. This is what politics is. and my voice doesn't matter. And the irony, of course, being that if you don't go out and vote, that precisely means your voice doesn't matter. I mean, if you want to make sure that politicians will never, ever care about you, don't vote. And because it means really nobody who gets elected cares about the people who didn't vote. They just don't. They have no, there's no reason for them to do so. So it's one of those things where it's like, you know, a lot of people are doing the whole protest vote kind of thing. And you're going, and they only care about the people who voted them in. So if you didn't vote them in, what the hell do they care about? Unless you have the power and resources at your disposal, like, you know, your own kind of mini Koch brother, to fund an entire campaign, the only voice you have is the voting booth. And while that may be downright minuscule in the face of millions upon millions, it is at least something. And something is certainly better than sitting at home and not doing anything, or getting all twisted up because, you know, your favorite demagogue didn't get it in. So, you know, moving the hell on.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I like to remind people is that if you think about economics, you think about the way things are marketed. Like, what we're looking at here is in a new world where we have all of these really great analytical tools. People who have money and people who are in these positions, they review that. They review what we do. Almost everything we do nowadays is watched and monitored and tracked. They get an idea of what the people are doing, just like they do when they target advertise. Well, they do the exact same thing with politics. They target advertise for you to get you to do what they want you to do. And let's say you are a conservative and you want to reduce the strength in numbers of the progressives in an area. You use a variety of tools at your disposal, things from gerrymandering to attack ads to just messing with the times that you can vote, or reducing the number of places where you can register, reducing the number of places where you can poll, and or making just that there's a few of them in a really densely populated area so the lines are long. All of these things would discourage you from wanting to be able to do it. Because for me, it took me 20 minutes to vote today. That's it. Just go in, essentially fill out paperwork, and I'm in line. A couple minutes later, I'm voting, and I'm done. Some people, 2, 3, 4 hours, they have to leave the polls open longer because not everybody can get in. Like, these are tools specifically designed to make you apathetic, to make you not want to do these things. And this is a tool that they can use, and it works both ways. And if you're a progressive and you want these people to vote, then you want to make it easier. You want to make it easier for them to vote. And these are the things that they do when they talk about making these some of these more ridiculous voter fraud cases that we'll talk about later. They don't exist. So the need for photo registration, IDs and stuff, it really doesn't discourage much because it doesn't happen. People aren't cheating the system. Most people really just want to do the right thing and they want to be heard. As all of these things, they're marketed, and it's a psychological aspect of it as well. So like you have to remind yourself that, yeah, well, my voice doesn't matter, but is someone trying to get you to say that? That's usually what does someone benefit by you essentially quitting? If I give up, who benefits?
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is, a lot of people don't see it that way. And you know, our friends over at Paleo Radio talked about this. They talked about whether you should be required to vote or not. Whether we should be allowing people that really don't understand things to go vote, you know. And for example, today at one of the polling stations, a story was brought to my attention about this lady that wanted to go in and vote a straight ticket. I live in a very conservative area. You can imagine what straight ticket she wanted to vote. And the lady at the polling place said, well, hold on a second. You have the back of it. Well, can't I just vote straight ticket for that? And they're like, no, you don't understand. The back it doesn't work like that. You know, you can't.
There are all these other things you have to vote for.
Yeah.
I only want to vote for the conservative proposals. Yes. What are you talking about?
And it's like, if you can't spoon feed this lady Republican gibberish or GOP gibberish, she's not going to deal with it. Now, I will admit to something here. This is a live admission. There's a few judges in Michigan that were running unopposed. They were both Republican. I don't like their stances aside from the Republicanness, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't vote for them. I left it empty. I was not going to cast a vote for them at all. And we could talk about, I would like to know, this should inspire people to get off their ass and do more, right? This should inspire people to go out and want to be involved in this process a lot more than they are. And it's sad that we have judges that are running a Republican ticket, not even just a neutral ticket. They're like flat out saying, we're conservative, therefore vote for me. And it's just sad that these people wouldn't, they're running unopposed. There's nobody that's opposing them in this election. And not that if they were running a Democrat or a Green Party that I would vote for those. I may still like him better. But I didn't like any of his politics. I don't like some of the decisions he's made. And so I was like, fuck this. I'm not voting for that individual.
Well,
So
they'll see the number of people that vote, and they'll see that they didn't get all of the votes. So essentially, if you didn't put a tick down, they'll know that from the discrepancy of the number of total voters to the number of people who just left that blank, in most cases, that it'd probably be the case. I didn't know what a few people were. And the nonpartisan stuff, that, it's just a group of people running for magistrate and city commissioner. A few of them I did the research on. But the majority of the nonpartisan stuff is I had to look them up to see who, what, where they were. And most of the time, there wasn't even a very good description of their policy. So in the end, it's really hard to know your local politics. You have to get involved. And what drives people to get involved in politics? When life gets crappy enough that you want to make change, right? And so we're looking at this presidential election, and people, maybe a lot of progressives don't care. They say, screw it, we're not interested in Hillary Clinton, so we're just staying home. And we're going to let Donald Trump get in and gold plate the whole Washington. Well, when stuff gets bad enough and terrible, and there may still be a chance when the little guy can stand up and yell and vote and try to make a change. But if you don't get out there and vote regularly, it may get really bad, and things will be changed enough that you really won't be able to make the change to try to make things better for yourself. And that's what I'm afraid of, that the pendulum will swing far enough that we'll lose some of our ability to modify the system.
And the problem is with that very, way of going about it, like Chris was just saying, and as far as you get so upset that you wait. I mean, at what time in any of our lives has it ever been a good policy to wait to make a decision until we're so bloody upset that we're seeing red? Like, when is this ever a good behavior pattern to get into, that we just wait and go, wait, I'm not pissed off enough because I know I'm fully rational and capable of grasping the nuances of situation when I'm really upset. So I'm going to wait until I'm really upset until I do that. What the heck? And yet that seems to be exactly what we do every 2, largely every 4, because the off presidential election year is even worse. And then everybody blames what happens. Like turnout drops to 40, 45%. And then people bitch and moan for the next 2 years. What happened? Well, more than half the electorate didn't bother showing up to vote. So, let's take some responsibility here.
I always wonder what would happen if we did what Australia does with mandatory voting. But one of the biggest problems they have in Australia is they have to tell people, listen, just don't show up drunk, so that you can figure out how to fill out the ballot. That's amazing. That's a great problem to have.
Mm-hmm. I would love mandatory voting. I think, we have mandatory. If you're going to take responsibility for a car, which is going to affect others, then you need it. If you're going to take, we now need mandatory health coverage. Guess what? Because your health affects other people. Well, guess what? Your vote affects other people.
And on that note, we're going to take a really quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a lot more shit about the election. Because we'll be right back with more alcohol-fueled Cellar Door Skeptics. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
It's Nomads Podcast. Kick back a while and listen to my friends on the Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
If you guys like what you're hearing on Cellar Door Skeptics, please consider sponsoring us on our Patreon page. Our goal at Cellar Door Skeptics is to help promote more science, skepticism, secularism, and humanism in the world. We want to create better content for our podcast and for you, the listener, all while trying to help promote local activism. We're going to strive to make better podcasts, and I'll tell you what, we're even going to contribute some of the proceeds to charity. So please join us over at Patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics to make sure that you sponsor us for as little as $1 an episode. Thank you guys so much, and prepare for the revolution.
Hey, what's up? I'm Steve Hayes.
And I'm Dave Curry.
And we're from ProfitCast.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics
on the Fox News Network.
They're not affiliated with Fox.
Everyone's a Fox affiliate.
Now, back to the show.
And welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. If you missed the first part of the show, we were ranting and raving about election night 2016, Donald versus Hillary versus Gary, and maybe versus Jill. We haven't seen many numbers come in from Jill. I've seen Gary pull in some numbers, you know. And so we were talking all about how election privilege fits, right? And moving forward.
Dun dun dun! Oh wait, we got an election update. Big important announcement here that Connecticut just came in, and so now we're finally starting to pick up some of the East Coast numbers. The current numbers that we got for Trump versus Clinton is 129 electoral votes for Trump, 104 for Hillary Clinton, and hopefully we'll start seeing that blue number grow a little bit here.
I don't know, Wolf. I mean, Chris. Are you sure they're gonna come in? Hold on, it's a key race alert.
Key race alert.
Oh, there's 17 gold states. Hey, Chris, do you know what gold states mean?
Trump owns them, and
you failed. Anyway, welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Sorry. The whole time we're on break, we got CNN playing. So we got CNN playing. We've got Time News playing. I've got 5:30 Hate playing. So I've got all these. I got live blogs, live video feeds. Everything's just filtering in.
We're the poster children for ADD right now.
We are, and we're trying to keep up because the whole point of this conversation, right, is to come back and talk about the election, and it's important, and I know we're making fun of CNN a little bit. We just can't help it because they're ridiculous. They're just, it's so ridiculous the amount of coverage they're doing, and then what they're churning around, and everything's this big thing. So that if you just tune in, and I bet there's a psychological media outlet to this, and maybe David can speak to this, maybe he can't, but there has to be something because they interrupt constantly.
So
they're
Dave,
constantly giving you bullshit updates. I mean, for fuck's sake.
So do people respond to screaming in your face? Is that the best way to get their attention, David?
Sometimes. I'm not quite aware of what therapeutic technique that is, but yeah, there have been a few therapists in history that have been known to yell at their patients.
Yeah, and you know, so like we went from Michigan being light blue to now light red.
Yep.
Which is disgusting to me, but I can understand. But there's only 12% reporting. And Hannah and I were watching this earlier before the show. And we were watching Florida reporting in. And we were actually watching Florida flip between light blue and light red. And we were kind of watching the same thing with Texas. Now, it looks like they're going to give Texas to Trump. Even though there's only 6% reporting, they're predicting it's going to go to Trump. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not the most intelligent individual probably in this room. And I could tell you that I don't understand how you can tell that it's going to go to Trump with only 6% of the votes coming in.
This is kind of stuff that a lot of people were surprised by when it came to the primaries. What they're doing is they're using exit polls. And usually exit polls are relatively reliable when it comes to large things like this. So this is how they're getting quick numbers when there's really no major amounts of reporting yet. And then the exit polls are usually confirmed.
Okay.
That's where the predictions and like what do they call it? I don't know. They have something like, we're making a projection. And so that's where they get that usually.
do. But yeah. And so, so we're watching this, and, some of these states are predictable. New York's going to go Democrat. I can see that. I'll be honest, Pennsylvania was a big one for me. I didn't expect Pennsylvania to be that loose. I mean, she's got a 16% lead at this point. Now, only 20% is reporting, but she's got a 16% lead over Trump in Pennsylvania. That's a shocker for me. Ohio's kind of a shocker as well. Donald's leading Hillary over 7.5 points in Ohio. And that's odd for me because I would have thought Ohio would have been a lot closer. And the only reason I say that is because, and I can't pronounce the guy's name, and you'll have to say the
Kasich.
Kasich,
whatever.
So you can't even say it either. Kasich and Trump were not buddies. I mean, Kasich was probably one of the closest running mates for Trump outside of Cruz.
Well, he was very moderate too.
Yeah, and he was. And I'll be honest, I don't agree with a lot of his information, especially with Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, that's the big one that killed a lot of people's attention and excitement about him.
But if he could have gotten rid of some of that, he fit in a more moderate tone. He should have easily taken that. And to see Ohio go back to Trump, it almost tells me that people have set ingrained biases, which kind of leads me to an article that somebody so graciously brought to our attention. Uh-oh. So there was an article that we were reading about a little bit earlier tonight, and it talked about a friend that happens to be on the show. So I don't know, maybe that's a little bias right there, David, but so David wrote a blog. I don't know, what was it, 2 or 4 years ago? This was for the last election.
Yeah, it was after the 2012 election.
Yep. And he wrote a blog that talked about it from a more, I don't know, I would say psychological viewpoint. And it's a very interesting blog. We will link everything into the description, and hopefully you'll write a follow-up blog to this. And he talked about predicting free will. So what I want to do is for the next segment of this show, and we're going to give updates randomly because Hannah has to interrupt just because it makes me feel better. It makes me feel like we're doing CNN type work here. And we're not as funny as Wolf Blitzer. Or maybe we're not as funny as Cognitive Dissonance. There's like 500 people listening to them rant and rave tonight. But I want David to talk about his article and kind of how it relates to this type of this election.
Well, I think, so much of it was, 2012 was the heyday of, Nate Silver. I think it was actually before he created, or he and a couple other people created 538. I'm more than willing to be corrected on that. But and it struck me at the time that this kind of disparity between people who, as a country and as a whole, we speak of, our individual wills and our ability to make choices irrespective of, the things around us. And yet we are inundated and enraptured by polls and predictive polling. And, we just got done talking about it. 6% of a state is known, and yet predictively they are able to, with virtual inevitability, say, yeah, we know where this state is going to go, even though, there's single digits of people reporting in so far. And and it struck me at the time that here was a guy who, in the 2012 election, called every state. Like he knew Obama was going to win months, if or at least weeks ahead of time. I mean, it was just foregone. There was no surprising him in his team that night, and it was just that whole like, well, wait a minute, if truly our ability to choose things as large as, a presidential election is totally outside of any kind of predictability in which, a certain form of free will would have to be, then there should be no potential at all in anybody being able to crunch the numbers and be able to predict in any kind of regularity what's going to happen, where people are going to go. And it just kind of, I wrote up an article then about it, and we'll likely do a follow-up about this tomorrow, seeing on how things are going and how sober I am.
How sober? You got to pass out at some point, David. I mean, you can't drink all night.
No, it's true. So, and there's, it's like, something where, wrote, said, we laud our personal experience, this whole feeling of what it means to be me and me in this situation. And yet we utterly and completely forget that situation doesn't exist in a vacuum, that you are embedded in a sociocultural, ideological background, and further controlled by, the structures in which you're in. Hannah was talking earlier about, he has to work 80 hours. It's tricky to get off work and go there. Tanner, you were talking about, a kind of employee situation that you had where somebody really wants to, and yet there are many other people out there who wouldn't be able to. All of this stuff is going on, and we're making our decisions, so-called, in the midst of all these things. Clearly, we are doing so under these constraints, and yet we still want to fool ourselves into thinking that none of it matters, except when, of course, we want to tell stories about our behavior that makes us look better or fits a general story of what we want ourselves to look like. So if a person isn't able to vote and they get asked about it, and generally before that, for instance, they were talking about, oh, no, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to make sure I'm going to vote ahead of time, I'm going to mail it in. And then it comes out, oh, wait, completely forgot and didn't get the time to do it. Well, what's the person going to do? Take the responsibility and go, yeah, I was a dumbass. I didn't, mail it in. I didn't take the time to do it. Or are they likely going to come up with, well, gee, this happened, that happened, the other thing happened. Guess what? They're going to go with that route. Yeah. By and large. Why? Well, because we like to paint ourselves in the best light possible. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just what we do. And if we're willing to do it at that scale, then we're willing then to do it at a larger scale of, well, no, the best idea possible is that only I control everything that I do. And I have, in a sense, final authority as to, what variables affect me. And that story just makes us feel better. And instead, what's really going on is a whole lot more complicated. And so we started, the show earlier about, this, we get all upset. And then what do people do? Well, they get upset and they throw their vote away, or they do a so-called protest vote, which makes meaningless the term protest. Protest means you have to actually be heard. So not voting means you weren't heard. So you're not protesting. You're essentially deflating whatever balloon you had possible to pop. So, this isn't a protest. This is you trying to put yourself out there in some kind of best way possible. And if you only have the two stories available to you of my vote doesn't matter, or I'm the protest rebel who will shine as a beacon of real democracy. Well, guess what? The likelihood is that's where you're going to go with the beacon of democracy.
Well, so I guess so you're telling us you're fine. You're fine. That's the whole point of having you on. I mean, it would be uninteresting if we talked over you 24/7. And Hannah's really good at that. I mean, I'm surprised he hasn't jumped out and said, "You didn't vote for Bernie." See there, I yelled in his ear, and I'm waiting for it to happen. I'm waiting for him to get drunk enough till he starts yelling, "You didn't vote for Bernie," and starts crying live on the show. But
in the primary, I will say that I did. So there you go.
Well, there you go. So you're saying we're all creatures of habit, and I think you've made 2 points that I really want to go talk about.
Sure.
I want to get back to throwing the vote away, or what you were talking about with the third-party vote is my assumption is what you were talking about in terms of your protest vote. I want to get to that in a second, but I want to go back to the creatures of habit thing. So for me, I'll be honest, out of everything I've voted for, I would say that I've probably voted, 80% Democratic, and I would say 19% Green Party and 1% Republican. And that's not because I was a Republican when I was younger. That's because there was genuinely a candidate I sided with a couple of different times. But for the most part, I've almost always voted Democrat. And like in this election, I can't vote straight party. On the local side, there were several Green Party candidates that I'd done research on that I aligned with because they weren't in the position to push woo-woo bullshit that I'm hearing out of Jill Stein. I can't vote for Jill Stein. I'm sorry. I can't. And it's not just the woo-woo side of it. And the listeners of the show can go back and listen to past episodes and hear Hannah and I talk about third-party votes. And I'm not against people that vote third party. Just I want to be clear about that. But I just personally myself could not do that. And, honestly, to me, Hillary is a neocon. I don't align with, let's say, 50 to 60% of her politics. I just don't. But I also have had a conversation with Hannah where him and I talked about if we move democracy too fast, it's going to fail. You don't put your fail-safes in there. You can't move from a conservative state to a socialist state in like 3 months to 2 years. You just can't do that. And so if we want to talk about bias and we want to talk about your article and how people kind of fit into their vote, do I fit into that? Is that me being able to not break out of my mold because I see the best path for the country to move towards, even if it is a neocon at this time, because I'm a social creature. I advocate for social issues more than I do anything else. That's the big platform I've always stood on for the last 8 years of my life. And I see the glass ceiling as an extremely important issue for me, even if she is not the most credulous individual. That's a huge thing for me. My daughters, and this is an emotional tangent, I guess, but my daughters asked me, who did I vote for? And I told them. And they said, well, we really like Hillary because we think that women should be able to be presidents. And we're talking an 8 and a 5-year-old that are having these conversations. And for me, it's extremely touching that my children are at least understanding politics are a big part of life, and they're a big part of my life. And they may take associations away, but what was their whole point? They want to see their gender represented. And you know why? You want to know why? Because all they see is fucking men up there.
Yep.
All they fucking see is men. And if we don't want to talk about fucking privilege for a male here, that's fucking privilege. I'm sorry. But that is. And it's disgusting that others don't see that and would throw a vote away just because they can't understand there's a glass ceiling that needs to be broken, that they can't see that there is a Democratic candidate that, while has their issues, still has the ability to move social change forward. And so you could tell me David, after my long fucking rant? Am I buying into my personal bias? Am I fitting into your article here? Is my free will violated?
Well, and I think we need to back up a little bit, because, you know, the whole issue here is that there is no non-contextualized free will. So we're not even discussing it. I end the whole article with going, look, recognizing that we make decisions in a nested reality is not cause for some lamentation. It's not cause for, oh my gosh, all of a sudden now I'm no longer free. Well, no, it's getting away from the delusion that you were ever fully capable of just choosing anything you wanted, regardless of whether or not you were able to see it. You simply can't choose what you're not able to see. And that sounds solipsistic, but it's simply the reality of our situation. If you're not able to think about a situation in a particular way, then you're not going to be able to see the consequences of that path.
So how do you move out of that, though? How do you move out of that? I mean, I don't mean to interrupt, but you got to think about this. If you can't see past this, and you don't have to use me as an example. You could pick, I don't know, I have a friend that is very insistent on voting for Trump, no matter what, because it's Republican. How do you move past that? How do you convince that individual that they're voting in that stream? And is it wrong that they do that then?
By and large, you're not going to. Because, and some of this has to do with, like, for instance, I lead a therapeutic group that primarily deals with anger. And
I should be a part of that.
And so, and one of the things is that, we go through some of these basic ideas, and one of the group members, more than one, frankly, sit there and they'll say, well, how am I supposed to put these skills? How am I supposed to put what you're teaching into practice? And they'll come up with an example of, road rage. They'll come up with when I'm faced with my mother, when, the in-laws or the spouse that really gets to them. And I have to step back and I go, whoa. We can't, by and large, we're not going to be able to immediately shift the way we do things at that kind of higher layer. You're talking about embedded habits that stretch for years, if not decades. The person who's going to vote for Trump, regardless of any information that you give them, is simply not going to be convinced by even the greatest of arguments, most likely, because they have years and years and years culminating in, this is the direction, my vote is going to take. What we do, and this has to do with what was just mentioned earlier about, we can't move a democracy in a more progressive fashion by simply leapfrogging over generations. You have to meet people where they are and kind of nudge them a little bit. And we're in that kind of thin spectrum of possibility and maybe a little bit past it in order so that they get used to it. And then you keep going later on. The same thing with somebody who's angry, the same person who's making what we would look at as a catastrophic decision. We have to start small. We have to come back to, okay, what is it that you care about? Well, odds are they're going to care about the same things you and I do. They're not, the person who votes for Trump hasn't given up on family. They haven't given up on, moral integrity. They haven't given up on caring about women or children or any of that. They're not despots. We're not looking at tens of millions of sociopaths here. What we are is looking at a group of people, like all the rest of us, who say, I stand for X, Y, and Z. This is the story I have about how to, what that means to me in the world at large. And this is the person that fits that model. We all do it. we're not, nobody's doing that pattern any differently. It's just that the story is different and the results are different. And so we need to come back to, what do we have together? What can we work on together? Build from that. And by virtue of that similarity, you will open up people to different things, often without the force of banging them over the head, at the beginning. Somebody who already has that much invested is not going to give it up without an enormous fight, and a fight that by and large isn't going to succeed other than making the person even more entrenched in where they are. I mean, there's plenty of research on that.
Yeah. So we're going to take a real quick commercial break here, David. Sorry to interrupt you. I want to take a real quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to let you finish your thought, but you got to get another beer. So we'll let you finish your thought. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics talking about the election and how much Hannah has to vomit tonight. We'll be right back.
I'm Demanda Wright. And we're promoting secular feminism. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
What's something I could do with a very sexy lady friend of mine that people would find provocative, interesting, and entertaining enough to tune in week after week? Oh, I know. A podcast. If you'd like to hear me and Kate be provocative and thought-provoking week after week, join us on the Unbuckling the Bible Belt podcast. We'd love for you to be part of our audiological three-way.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old atheist show format? Cellar Door Skeptics Podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
Oh, welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics live election coverage.
A little bit lower energy here. I feel like I'm watching an ISIS execution video.
and so I want to give a quick shout out to all the Patreon sponsors. If you would like to support the show more, if you would like to donate, help us help us pay for the cost of Hannah's funeral after he has a heart attack here. Please go over to Patreon. For as little as $1 a episode, you can sponsor us. You can help us get new equipment, bring guests on, and you can even help donate to our favorite charities, which are all local, and we all make sure we donate back. We also want to give a shout out to a wonderful, wonderful woman who has gone over and she's given us a rating on iTunes, and she gave us a 5-star rating. So I have to give her kudos for that because I think we're amazing. I think Hannah's amazing. Hopefully Hannah thinks I'm amazing or super or spendicious or some shit like that. And
You're
anyway,
making up words for yourself?
I'm making up words for myself. That's how it works, man. That's how it works around here. I make up my own words. I tell the best words.
You tell the best words?
I say the best
impressive.
words. I don't know what.
That's a super Trumpism.
Super Trumpism. Anyway, so if you're listening to the show, you can download us on iTunes. You can listen to us on Spreaker. I encourage you to go over us and give us a rating, no matter what rating it is. Hopefully
Just tell
5-star.
us what you think.
But yeah, all we need is the feedback. Because that's how we can make Hannah a better person.
My ego doesn't really need any more buffering. I would just like to know what people think when they listen to the show. If they like when I just sit back and let people talk for a while and let just Chris work his way through a bottle of whiskey and start jumping off the desks or something, or if they like it when we do a really heavy science segment, so it sounds like Bill Nye is here and I'm copying his every word. I mean, those are my favorite segments, but they're dry and a little bit boring. So, I mean, what people think about mixing it back and forth, the political stuff and everything. We would just love to hear what people think, and if they want to give us a good rating so more people listen, that'd be awesome too.
And if you want to join us in the chat, we have a challenge from a listener. And I'm going to say it. Are you ready for this?
Oh, man.
Where's the drum roll? Do we have a drum roll effect on here? I don't think we do. That's not a drum roll, but that's a mystery roll. Take our country back. Now, Dennis, I challenge you to send us a picture of what you just described in the chat room. So if you're listening
I don't think we want to see a picture of that. I'm pretty sure the chat room needs to be censored.
No.
The FCC is going to arrest us for publishing what is on the chat right now.
Oh, yeah. So in all fairness, come join us in the chat. We do a live episode every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. We go live. We do a chat. Someday we'll do it on the fucking website. Maybe on YouTube. I don't fucking know. Sometimes on Facebook. Sometimes Facebook doesn't work. But we do talk live, and we love live listener interaction. Because we're hoping someday to get on a public radio where they allow us to swear, and we get to take listener calls. So we're going to figure that out. Maybe we'll be able to take listener calls. But this reminds me of a story, though, Hannah. You were talking about people watching us, right? So last night...
Through the window?
Through the window. Through the window. Through the walls.
Hello.
So we were... the wife and I and a friend of mine were downtown last night seeing Richard Dawkins and Julia Sweeney with the CFI Michigan. And we were down there, and we were having a great time, you know. On our way back... The Rumpf just happened to be at the Voss Hall, and there was millions of fucking people on the streets. I mean, they were walking in the goddamn streets. I mean, these people weren't even paying attention. Either they were drunk or high on Trump or something. I don't know, but they were walking the damn street. So as we're driving by, you know, my buddy goes, you know, watch this. He sends me a text. And I was like, oh. And so I sent him a text back. So we text back and forth in the same car, you know, in the same vicinity. We could talk to each other, but we were testing to see if somebody was watching our cell phones. And I can say this now because we didn't say this in text, but we were talking about plots that are unscrupulous just in an effort to see if somebody was monitoring our cell phone usage. Because we had a presidential elector nominee downtown right by where we were texting. And I could safely say I've had no dark suits come to my house, no mystery vans.
Were you talking about
house.
the disappearance of a presidential nominee or something here?
Maybe. Maybe.
You're on a list now in the NSA main headquarters.
Anyway, so let's dive back into the show because I think Hannah has an update on where the elections are standing right now. Go ahead, Hannah.
Unfortunately, the number keeps getting bigger on the red side, so I'm going to start maybe staring at the wrong end of a shotgun here.
Hey, hold on. I think we got a shot to do for this one.
That's a better than staring at the business end of a shotgun.
It is, and I think I poured shots while we were on break. Are you ready for this, Hannah?
Of course I am.
Here's to waking up hungover tomorrow morning.
Unbelievable.
And for those following along at home, that shot was sponsored by Jägermeister, the alcohol that tastes good and helps you forget about the election process here.
Your next job is going to be as a madman. I know it. You're going to be on the show, and you're going to have an office on the corner, and you're going to drink Jaeger, and your slogan is going to be Jaeger makes you feel good. That's going to be a big one.
What's funny, Hannah, we talk about this at work because there's a couple of us at work that drink, and that's probably one of the few things that in common I have with some of my coworkers, but we talk about, I have an office that locks that I'm required to lock every night because of the computer equipment in it. And we talk about this. We could put a bar in here, disguise it as a cabinet, you know, for our coats, and we could just start drinking every day. Every time shit goes like this goes down. Oops.
Sounds effective. Like we would be able to get a whole bunch of stuff done at work if alcohol was freely flowly and forklifts and all that kind of stuff that you guys have. I've seen way too many. I browse weird parts of the internet, and I saw a video of this woman just got scooshed by by a forklift, and she's like trying to hold it because it was tipping over. Yeah, don't do that. Don't ever do that, and don't even look for a video on the internet that says a woman gets messed up by a forklift because you're not gonna have a good time.
No, it's not. So let's go back to the electric codes. Before we went to break, in all fairness, I cut David Teachout out. I'm sorry,
you
David.
had to. The music started.
You're good.
He likes to talk, and so that's the nicest way to put it. And he's very informational, and we love having him on. But sometimes I got to cut him off because we have to do commercial breaks. Not that we're paid to do them, but because we're hoping you'll go over to Patreon and sponsor us for $1 an episode. Anyway, but David, let's go back to, we were talking about my inability to break out of some of my cultural norms, right? Some of my biases. And we were talking about the article you wrote last year. And you were talking about this gentleman named Nathan Silver. Is that correct?
Yeah, Nate Silver.
Yeah.
Yes. And you were talking about how he predicted a very large percentage of the population, or of the vote for the 2012 election. And I think that's interesting because I could tell you right now, I'm skeptical of him because he predicted this year 71% to 28%.
Which is actually a low number. Like, people got mad at him that he wasn't giving Hillary more.
Yeah. But so far, in all fairness, Colorado, New Mexico have all gone to Hillary. Now, the areas he's incorrect on so far is Michigan. He's incorrect about North Carolina, and he's incorrect about Florida.
Well, we know
and New Hampshire.
We know that he basically ate his hat during the primaries on Michigan when Bernie won Michigan. When they said that he was more than double digits down to lose to Hillary, he said it was one of the biggest upsets in modern political history that, you know, an independent or an up-and-coming candidate like Bernie Sanders had overtaken, you know, the big lead. And so, I mean, Nate Silver, he's really, really good at what he does. He's not infallible, and he gets a bit of a messianic, I guess, reputation when it comes to political predictions and stuff. So I like to just keep an eye on what he's talking about, but I don't go 100% with what he says. One of the reasons why is the polling stuff that you were talking about earlier, David. Just basically going with the numbers, seeing what these things are. And whenever I think of this, it always goes back to a Hitchens quote that I love from one of his smaller books, Letters to a Young Contrarian. I got it up right here. He says, everybody knows that the question can be loaded. Actually, it starts, I'm sure you are partially armored, as most intelligent people are, against this kind of thing. Everybody knows the question can be loaded. Everybody knows that the sample can be weighted. Everybody knows the intelligibility of the questions depends on the commonplace and the regnant assumptions. It's a mark of sophistication to understand compromise by passive dress rehearsals. Basically, the polls condition the poll. So we see all these polls going out. We see all these polls, poll. And we don't look up to see who is basically coming up with this information. How trustworthy are they? One of the ones that I usually trust, almost without question, the Pew Foundation does a great job of being very nonpartisan and very honest with their research. But we see, you know, CNN and Fox News. Everybody's got a poll, and everybody's kind of skewing it and looking at their numbers. They're conditioning the real polls. All of these mini polls are changing the way people vote and changing the way people act when it comes to these points. So that's kind of where I wanted to talk about with the Nate Silver thing. Is just that it's important to respect what he's saying, but we got to hold him at an arm's length because otherwise we're going to kind of just follow into whatever he said.
Well, and there's actually something you just said there where these, I'll try to get to exactly what you said. These polls end up changing, these little mini ones, so-called, end up changing what people are thinking. You're like, wait a minute. That right there goes into, because we can have two different kind of conversations here. We can get into the science of polling, and I'm going to go right on ahead and admit to my ignorance about a lot of the mechanics about it. I'm just not a mathematician. Or we can have a more, the other conversation, which is the mere ability to be able to predict any outcome means that people's decision-making capacities are restrained. that we have, this goes into, we can stretch it into identity politics. There's a great little video that Sam Harris put out a few weeks ago about identity politics. And there's a nice little cartoon that goes with it. And he begins it by going, look, essentially, if you're a white male, those two data points should not, just logically speaking, they should not have anything to do with, ideologies, what religion you might be, and what positions on, for instance, gun control and whether or not the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus was true. These
we all know things, that's true, though. Come on. Sorry.
So, these things, they shouldn't have anything to do with it. And yet, they do. The very fact that we can look at data points that logically shouldn't have anything to do with it, and yet still predict with a high degree of fidelity what a person's likely going to think, just completely obliterates the notion that we live in each of our individual lives without any connection whatsoever to anything around us, that we are uninfluenced. So the question isn't, coming back to Tanner's thing, well, how do I break out of that? And the thing is, you don't. You stop. This is a no-win situation. You do not break out of biases. You do not break out of your social context. You can expand it. You can endeavor to use the power of, choice to say, hey, let's see about having new experiences, talking with new people. These things will inevitably expand the ideas that you have available to you, which then means that you have different behaviors that are available to you. And once you do that, then you have the ability to change. And unless you do that, if you, continue to operate in an echo chamber of Facebook, in the echo chamber of Twitter, if you unfollow every single person that disagrees with you even the littlest bit, if you only, look at one news site, if you only operate and have friendships with people who agree with you completely, then it's not that you won't be able to escape it. It's just that you'll continually shrink the circle of potential that you have your life to live.
Okay, so
and that's what I end up talking about.
I have a question. Okay, so and you explain this. So the whole reason having you on is because you're kind of an expert in some of these areas, right? So I get to ask you, I get to pick your brain, and I like that part. How about that? So I enjoy that part of our show is because Hannah and I both agree that neither one of us are experts. Our goal is to learn as much as we can, present as much information as we can, and bring on the experts when we can, right? So I grew up extremely conservative. I grew up extremely religious.
Mm-hmm.
I turned 18. I left religion. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't completely turn into an atheist and turn the whole thing off. And for those listening and who listened to my old show, Atheist Analysis, you probably knew, you know my backstory. So I don't need to get into 100 million yards of this. But when I was 16 is when I started to move away from the Republican rhetoric. And I'm talking, my dad wasn't just a Republican. My family is not just Republican. We're talking hardcore Republican, as in I was fed Rush Limbaugh my whole life. I was fed Bill O'Reilly. Fox News was a news station, right? That's where I got my information from. I very quickly left that. For me, it was the beginning of it was over a LGBT aspect, right? I had a friend that he didn't identify as bisexual, but he did identify as a liberal Democrat who basically said, why the hell would you be against any of this stuff, right? So that's the first thing that actually got me questioning, because I liked him. I liked, his family, and I didn't quite understand why he couldn't fit into my mold. Like, it was like, no, I need you to fit in, but you don't. And because I was always a social rebel, I was always, I partied, I smoked cigarettes, I enjoyed anarchy as a child. I was aggressively for anarchy when I was 16. Like, I wanted to watch the world burn. I had nothing better to lose. But the thing became is that, and you could talk to my wife because she'll admit, My politics have moved from between 18 to 30. I think I'm 33 or 34. I don't know how old I am. Damn it. I think I'm 33. I'll be 34 next year. Anyway, my politics have moved so far left. It's not even funny. I mean, we're talking, I've voted for, 1 or 2% Republicans in my whole life. That's for somebody that I identify as an actual independent. I don't technically identify as a Democrat because
you protested abortion clinics. I mean, that's hardcore.
I did when I was a kid, yes. So let's make that reference. When I was younger, I used to stand out in front. Now I donate to the people that protest against the protesters. So,
Nice.
But in all fairness, okay, let's go back in all fairness. You were talking about you don't leave biases, but I quickly left my biases. I mean, very, very quickly. And I don't understand how that fits into the model that you've been presenting.
Well, one thing, totally there with you. I mean, you both know my own story. And, it was about 4 years removed. I was about 22 when I left most of it. In similar background and raising. I mean, Falwell and Limbaugh were like, the 13th and 14th apostles.
Ew.
Yeah. So when I speak of biases, it's that I speak them in general term, in the sense that you can never escape from biases themselves. You can switch them. What happens is, and we can use your story because it's great in the way that you phrased it. Your first thing was you had a friend. Well, now we have somebody who you care about. You have somebody that means something to you that doesn't, as you put it, fit the mold. So now you've got this cognitive dissonance going on. You've got this idea of what people should be like, and you've got somebody who on another end goes, wait a minute, I like this person, they're cool people, and yet they don't fit the mold of what should be. How the heck am I going to make any sense out of this? Then you add in the other wonderful bit of your story, which is the whole anarchist thing. It's the whole, watching the world burn. There was proclivities already there from childhood that said, look, I want to be a rebel. In fact, the idea of even being a rebel was enticing to you. That is not true of every child. And the idea of striking it on your own, that phrasing is not one that everybody resonates with. There are a great many people out there who, when faced with that kind of life idea, just shrink. They're like, are you kidding? That is abject anxiety you're asking me to take on. And so you've got, personality quirks that are helping. You've got, a family dynamic that possibly may have allowed for a little bit of questioning, even a mere small percentage of time that said, you know what, it's okay that you ask those questions. It's okay that you, behave that way, that you are your own person. That phrase may have popped up at some point. Well, all of those things go into this soup of, wait, this doesn't fit with the authoritarian mindset that is conservative religiosity, and at that time, particularly, conservative politics. And so now you have to have essentially an internal self-talk of, wait, I'm being drawn to this, and I have people that I care about that don't fit. At the same time, I've got this. What am I going to do about it? Well, I'm going to go looking. And you're already then prone to looking for the things that don't fit what was already there. So as time goes on, you make more and more decisions, you expand your experiences more and more, until eventually you're now voting 80-20, Democrat instead of 90-10 Republican, or whatever, just throwing out arbitrary numbers. It's not at all that the idea of bias went away. There are still some information now that you likely wouldn't look at. Just like before there was information you wouldn't necessarily look at, unless there's somebody that pops into your life that goes, hey, what about this? You know, in this, there are many layers to it. But one of the difficulties, of course, now, which of course, here's the next question. Well, wait a minute. What would stop me from then going back, you know, to that kind of thing? What if somebody else came into my life? Well, some people have, except that it's a little trickier once you've already made it. Because now you're going to have to, now the dissonance is going to have to get a lot bigger. You're going to have to, and further, the system that you have in place now isn't as rigid. It's more capable of movement. You have that kind of skeptic mindset that says, yeah, I could be wrong. You know, the greatest movement, I think, occurs when you're operating under a system that says, no, I can't be right. Or rather, I can't be wrong. That this is true by dictate. You know, the greatest amount of change can occur in that precisely because the boundaries are so rigid. The more loose you are with being able to tackle new ideas, the less change appears as huge because it isn't. You know, it's still, well, wait a minute, I still am kind of the same person. I just kind of shifted over here in degrees. Whereas if you're only stuck in this very narrow idea of what is true and right, you know, the black and white, then any shade of gray becomes, you know, horrifying, becomes monumentally huge, particularly if you're, you know, from that perspective. Whereas now with varying shadings, you can go, oh, well, yeah, I moved a little bit and I'm still me. This didn't, you know, upend my life, but that's because you're no longer in that kind of black and white world.
And I guess in all fairness, I still have friends that do vote Republican primarily or do vote either Green Party or Libertarian Party. I mean, I do have those friends. And I've been challenged.
So. I'd hope so.
Yeah. And I've been challenged, actually. I've been called out on my support for Hillary on multiple occasions. And it's because of some of the issues with the collusion, some of the issues with her, how the nonprofit runs, some of the issues of that in reality she is a bigger war dog than, not than Trump, but than the other two candidates. And I've been called out on these things. And I've taken them into serious consideration because for me, it becomes the fact that it's not that I don't care if I'm wrong. I don't like to be wrong, I'll be honest with you. But, you know,
nobody does.
But, you know, for me, the bigger thing is, okay, how can I be right? And I guess maybe this can relate to, was it last night or the night before? It was 2 nights ago. I watched the Gary Johnson rally. And as I'm watching the Gary Johnson rally, I'm going, I identify with this. Holy shit, I actually identify with this. And then all of a sudden he talks about healthcare and how he wants to not socialize it, but like, you know, the free market take it over. And then I go, okay, hold on a second. Oh, you just fucked that whole thing up, dude. You just fucked the whole thing up. And maybe that's because my bias with Chris Hanna. And I'm going to pick on Chris a little bit just because I have developed a very close bond with Chris. At least I feel. Maybe he doesn't feel that way. But I feel very close with Chris. And I can identify and feel sympathy for him when it comes to the fact that I look at his disability and the fact that he works very hard, the fact that he works to own his own business, to be his own boss, to continue to tribute to the free market as best as he can, but yet he gets fucked over because of his disability. And it bothers me that nobody, these other larger parties, this is a disenfranchisement, you know, to me. And if we had a more universal health care that didn't sponsor fucking insurance companies, he wouldn't be in the same position that he's in. And so I can, the empathy aspect, I can feel very aggressively here because for me, when I look at that, I go, how would you not want to support this? How does nobody want to support this? And maybe my bias is even though I'm opening myself up, some of the things that he talks about and that he has to deal with is completely more touching to me than the fucking white guy at my work that has to worry about if he has to pay 2% more of his $100,000 salary. I don't feel empathy for him because, for fuck's sake, when you drive around in a Lexus, you own your own house, you get 4 weeks of vacation, and you yell at people and have job security, I don't feel bad because I have a guy that makes, a lot less than that works more hours than him, that now has to go take money out of his personal pocket to pay for a disability that there's no fucking way a large deity would have bestowed that on anybody unless they're a dick, and God could be real and be a fucking dick.
Well, I mean, this one is like one of those disabilities, just hearing loss, hearing aids. We talk about people lose vision, so they have to deal with that. This particular thing is considered to be the problem of age. So people usually lose their hearing when they get older. And so something is covered with Medicare or Medicaid, and they don't cover it for any kind of young people. So I'm a 32-year-old male, and I have worn hearing aids for 28 years now. I just got quotes for my hearing aids, and they're like, hey, well, you want the bottom of the barrel, cheapest piece of garbage we sell? That's $4,500. The next level, $55, then $65, then $7,500. And they typically last approximately 5 years. So here's your $1,200 bill a year just to be able to hear and function in society. Well, I'm wearing 2 different brands of hearing aids right now because one of them broke, and I can't just throw $7,500 at the window to cover it. So I've been fighting with insurance companies trying to find coverage that'll cover a young person with this. And I've been trying to. I actually went to my audiologist and I told him, I was like, "What are you going to do to keep my business?" And in the end, they pushed me to Costco of all places, a giant box store that I can't stand national products like that. And of course, now I'm going to go for the cheapest thing because I've been funneled and forced into that market.
I agree. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about if there was a fucking election fraud. Because I don't know if there was. Hannah seems to think so. Just kidding. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics and alcohol.
Hey guys, this is Wyatt Mathers from the Atheist Avengers podcast. You are listening to the Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution.
Hi, this is Dan, Brian, and Matt with the Godless Revolution podcast. We've had a lot of great guests on this show, such as Russell Glasser, Dan Arrow, Brian Fields, David Silverman, Doug Mesner, a.k.a. Lucian Greaves, and Joey Kirkman, whom we love a lot.
We've also had a lot of really cool local guests. And we're a podcast that likes to fight for the separation of church and state and against anti-skepticism of all kinds.
You should give us a listen, because if you don't, you're going to be really sad.
Make your ears happy. Listen to the Godless Revolution podcast.
If you guys like what you're hearing on Cellar Door Skeptics, please consider sponsoring us on our Patreon page. Our goal at Cellar Door Skeptics is to help promote more science, skepticism, secularism, and humanism in the world. We want to create better content for our podcast and for you, the listener, all while trying to help promote local activism. We're going to strive to make better podcasts, and I'll tell you what, we're even going to contribute some of the proceeds to charity. So please join us over at Patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics to make sure that you sponsor us for as little as $1 an episode. Thank you guys so much, and prepare for the revolution.
This is Deborah McTaggart from Beyond the Trailer Park, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Looking to the sky once again, I wonder why I'm completing the cynics and even in my life. I've never seen it coming through the demons that I summon like a legion by the dozen. I don't know what I'm becoming. I've seen the lights of horizons you may never know. But I've seen the gates of hell sometimes. I'm afraid that's
Every time.
Sorry. I love death metal, man. I don't know what to tell you. I don't even know how many people even listen all the way to the end of the show to hear that commercial. Just so I can fucking scream into the fucking mic. Because that's what the fuck I feel like right now.
We might have to do... Oh, my God. The number keeps getting bigger.
Do-do-do.
150 to 109 Trump right now. I might as well just go slam my head in a car door.
Are you sure you want to leave here tonight? We've had enough alcohol to kill a whole bowl. You need to call into work tomorrow.
I can't think of a better way to spend my day tomorrow. I've got a Trump presidency looming, and I'm going to a funeral as well. Nothing good is going to come tomorrow, I'm guessing.
Probably not.
It's just...
And the worst thing on my side of it is I have to go in, and at least, how about this? And here, now we're tangenting again, and maybe it's because of the alcohol, but I feel tangenting
Why
tonight.
not? Let's just do it. This is chaos. This is absurdity.
So I'm not overly political at work, but I do correct people, per se, when it comes to talking about their sexist viewpoints. I'll be honest. I'm definitely not shy about that. So I come back. Everybody knew I went and vote in the morning, and I got to work earlier than I normally do, even because I got up even earlier to go stand in line that I didn't have to stand in line. So I get there, and about a couple hours into it, there's another guy that's a little vocal, and he's talking about how he voted for Trump, and he's going through this whole thing, and the two other ladies in the office, they both voted for Trump, and I know they did. I know for a fact they did because they've been talking about this. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden one of the ladies goes, "Oh, well, I bet Chris voted for Hillary over there." And I'm just sitting here. I'm actually just trying to do work. Like,
you're brimming, you're boiling. You're like,
yes.
I will destroy you.
Yep, I'm like, you're right. I did. There you go. Everybody can now hear this. I did officially vote for Hillary. I didn't vote straight Democratic ticket, but I did vote for Hillary, and we could talk about why later if we want. But I'm sitting here going, why the fuck is this a conversation at work? Like, I'll have the conversation with you about how you voted, but why should we get into your personal politics at work? Because whether we agree or not, we fucking got to work together tomorrow morning. I have to respect you as a colleague, whether I agree with your fucking politics or not. And I don't. And so then I just kind of sat there and I smiled and I kept going through my paperwork. And then this other guy goes, "Nah, he's not dumb enough to vote for Hillary.
Oh, man.
She's a horrible person." I'm sitting here just going, all I want to do right now is
HR.
correct you. I just want to
HR.
correct you on the fact that you, A, shouldn't have this conversation, and B, for the fact that you're belittling women, and C, because you're sitting here trying to call me out and bully me. But I've already voted, so it doesn't fucking matter. Why would you bother to bully me? It's not going to change my opinion. I voted, dude.
If anything, you should have told him, be like, well, I canceled your vote out, so you don't have a voice, so shut up.
And so I just sat there and I smiled. And then the lady comes back and she goes, "Well, you're right. Maybe he didn't vote. He voted third party." And then the guy comes back and he goes, well, voting third party is just throwing your vote into the garbage. You're supposed to just sit at home on election day. And I literally said, I don't agree with you. And at this point, it's better for me to walk out of the office because I don't know what to say to because you can hear me on here. If you're listening to the show, you're obviously listening to the show because you want to hear Hannah and I talk about things. Maybe him more than me. But I'm a very dominant fucking voice, and I have a very strong opinion. And the problem here is that I just want to spew my opinion at work. I just want to vomit all over these people and be like, both of you fucking assholes are wrong, and you're wrong for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. So I ended up just getting up and walking out. And then later on, a couple of the other people in the office, like I had a meeting, and they came in, and I was sitting there, and this one guy goes, "So I know who you voted for." And I was like, "I don't know how you know that." He's like, "Well, I follow you on Facebook." Because I have a pretty public Facebook. So, all right. So I was like, all right, fair enough. And he's like, "I really feel isolated." He's like, "I didn't know all these people at work actually thought like this." He's like, how disgusting is that? And I was like, well, that's their personal opinion. They get to have their own opinions. And I said, in all fairness, we shouldn't have this conversation because, I agree with you. And if you want to have a beer after work, I'll be more than happy to have this conversation with you. But really at work, we shouldn't be having this. But I can feel empathy for you. That's why I told him, I was like, I feel empathy that you feel like a minority in this situation.
Well, don't you have an HR department? Don't you have a set of rules where it's like, listen,
they don't. No, they don't have a set of rules, man. Not about if they do, they don't publicize that about election stuff at least.
Wow, I just realized that Idaho is leaning red right now. Ugh, they've added that one a moment ago. I'm really interested to see what happens with Utah because they've said that Utah is like in Paul Revere is riding through that state saying the Mormons are coming. The Mormons are coming. They basically deserted completely. And what's the guy's name? McMillan, the candidate. They're saying that there's a third party guy who's he's a Republican, but they're saying that he could potentially win that state. And so if neither Trump nor Clinton managed to get to the 270 mark, then he would be the third person, that basically in third place, even more than Gary Johnson, because he would actually get some electoral votes. It takes a whole state win to get some votes. And so if nobody gets to the 270 mark, we're looking at the House and Congress basically making the decision as to who is going to be the next president, and they'll pick from the top 3 candidates. So this guy could have a chance. And if, Republican dominated, if they say, we don't like Donald Trump, there's another Republican who could potentially be there who could get it. So this guy that I heard on NPR talking one day, and they were like, yeah, this guy could be the next president, and you've never heard of him. And I was like, wow, this sounds like clickbait on the radio, but potentially, it's incredibly unlikely that'll happen. But, this is a possible scenario that could save us at least from the craziness that is gold-plated Trump Tower right next to the White House.
Some of me just, I have a hard time taking serious some of the election aspect of this. I just do. And, earlier we talked about breaking out of that bias. And I almost feel, and I hate coming back around to this, because we've talked about this for 2 fucking segments, but to a point I feel that that's right. In my personal life, and I guess maybe if my parents listen to this show, I'll get shit for this later. Maybe that's why my dad doesn't talk to me right now. But my dad was all for Cruz. Now Trump's in, now he's for Trump. And so when it was open to the Republican Party, to the free-for-all, he was for the one that fit his conscience. Now he's stuck in this lane. And I'm waiting for him to come to me and be like, well, look, you got stuck in your lane. But I wanted to say is that Gary Johnson cannot bring it for me in any way, shape, or form, because all he wants to do is tell you, I believe in social equality, but I want the market to figure it out. And I can't buy into that. That is so far from Bernie, it's not even funny. Like, it's just, it's like, eating a taco versus eating a fucking tuna sandwich. It's complete. Tuna sandwiches are disgusting, and tacos are fucking amazing. And
that's the best analogy that explains nothing that I've ever heard.
but that's the whole thing, though. If you think about it, though, that's the thing is he's gonna accuse me of a bias because he knows. I have a Hillary sign in my front yard, and I haven't publicized this on the show yet, but I do. I genuinely, and I did, I've had it out front for fucking almost a month now. I've had a Dennis Murphy sign out front for almost 2 months now.
And he's up to 26% of the electorate in the Michigan 2nd Congressional District. Unfortunately, Bill Huizenga, the incumbent, is at 70%. So it doesn't look like much is going to happen with about 20% reporting. So hopefully we'll see some good switches, because I guess in Muskegon, Dennis really ripped it apart with 65% during the primary. So
he did.
Hopefully we'll see some positive come this, because only 4 Democrats have held the second seat since it was created, and they have been Republican for the last 35 years. So it'd be nice to see a little bit of a color change and maybe see a different voice in this. But either way, we love the guy, and we're real proud that his candidacy was well received, and hopefully he continues to fight the good fight.
And we do. And Dennis, if you're listening to this, he messaged me on Skype earlier, ironically enough, and I saw him last night in the crowd. I didn't get to meet him in person, but I saw him in the crowd last night at the Richard Dawkins, Julia Sweeney event. Dennis, you are an amazing individual, and we've wholeheartedly supported you on this show, and we'll continue to support you in all your future endeavors. Now, we go back to this bias thing, and I don't know how to move away from this, and maybe we blame David Teachout for fucking joining the show tonight.
It's what we get for bringing that meta stuff in here.
He's like, oh, let me fuck up the inner workings of Cellar Door Skeptics. They're going to talk about only one topic tonight.
Well, he's here to tell us that we're good enough, we're smart enough that doggone it, people like us. That's a reference. I hope anybody,
movie.
if you don't get it, look it up and you'll get a good laugh because Al Franken is awesome.
So how about this? How about this, David? Let's move away from the bias, but not too far, right? I want you to. How do you break out of this, right? How do we help people realize they have a bias, and how do we help people on a psychological side move past this? Because in all fairness, the presidential election's important. The Senate and Congress, or the Senate is probably more actually important than the presidential election, in my opinion.
Yep,
Outside
I'll
of the
agree.
Supreme Court nominees, they're more important. But how do we move past this? Because if we want more than a two-party system, we have to start locally. And I've advocated for this for a long time. And I'm honestly on the show. Here you go. Here's Drunken Chris telling you I vote third party for several of the candidates in Michigan, not just because I want to see third party flourish, but because I aligned with their non-pseudoscience, non-Jill Stein bullshit.
Wi-Fi cancer.
Wi-Fi cancer. Yeah. Hashtag Wi-Fi cancer. But how do we move past this? Can you give us any positive news that we can have?
One in much
Answer
of
is
this
no.
comes down to
You have no answer? Damn it, he's silent. No answer.
Sorry. It slowed down there a bit and got jittery.
Clink time.
All right,
we're doing shots while you talk.
Shots while you talk. Keep going. Just ignore us. We're just drinking here.
Well, I think a lot of it, you want to know how to change, other people. Look at your own life. I mean, what was the instrumental issue that helped change? And that was people in your life that you cared about. It was that empathy that allowed you to expand outside of the narrow circle that you were in. And that's where we start. And I look at this as very much like the therapy that I do. Many of the clients that come through, I have very little in common with. They're from very different socioeconomic backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, different educational backgrounds. I mean, I'm a cis white male, in low middle class, 2 master's degrees, educated person. I'm so far into the privileged and outside class as to be almost ridiculous, and yet I am able to bond with each of these people because I start with figuring out what it is that we share together. What do we care about? That person cares about their family. So do I. That person cares about being, having entertainment in their life. So do I. That person cares about moving forward in their life. So do I. The picture of what that may look like is different. But if we were to start there, we'd never get along. If I start with looking at a person as being completely encapsulated or held to a Trump supporter, then all I'm doing is simply saying, well, this is all they are, and I'm going to fill in the gaps of what that means. And instead, I go, wait a minute, they're also human. They also probably, therefore, care about many of the same things I do, and start there. Then we start having and building these relationships that then allow for change to occur. If we start later on, you were mentioning the coworkers, these people had no idea who you are. They have no idea what your background is. And yet they're making vast sweeping judgments based on an assumption about who you voted for with one person. I mean, really? They don't know what all went into. They don't know whether or not you had to hold your nose to do it. They don't know, the journey that you went in on, going from third party to finally coming to this. They don't know the stories about your daughters. They don't know any of these things. And yet, by simply saying, well, yep, this person voted for X, fill in the blank person, therefore that's all I need to know about this person. And that is where I have a problem with. And when I talk about bias, it is exactly that. It is the general bias of we align ourselves with the people that are most like us. We align ourselves with the people that we feel the most connected to. We do not move outside of the people we feel connected to. If you had never had a Hannah, Chris Hannah in your life, then the odds are your life would not look like it does now. It just wouldn't. If you'd never had daughters, your life would not look like what it does now. And if you had not met your wife, if you had not made all of these decisions that brought these people into your life, you wouldn't be thinking the same things you're doing now. And that right there is where we must meet everybody else. We have to meet them at the places where we can, and then move forward from that. If we start from, you're different from me, I want to make you more similar, we're not going to get anywhere. If we start at, this is where we're alike, then we will move. It's how it works, because that's taking advantage of the general bias of we like being the people, near the people that we care about. We like holding to the things that, that are embodied in the people that we're close to. You want to boil it all down to, the fact is, it's not about, the heart will override the brain or whatever. It's not that simple. It's that the brain will follow and make excuses and make rationales for being close to and having an idea of the world that keeps us close to the people we care about. Well, we have to start there. There are any number of stories out there of people, African Americans getting together with Trump supporters who figure out, in fact, what was it? Did you catch the SNL skit that Tom Hanks? And, Tom Hanks played, the kind of the down south hillbilly Trump supporter, and he gets put on Black Jeopardy. And look it up. It is absolutely just hilarious. And he starts answering a few of these questions that have to do with more like how family works and how mamas used to, treat people and so on. And the two Black contestants are looking at him like, man, you're all right. Like, one even like, they high-fived each other. They were all like, yeah, this is exactly what's going on. This is, we got a lot in common. And then we went to Final Jeopardy, and the question was, what lives matter? The person playing, the Alex Trebek character was like, well, it was good while it lasted.
Yeah. What an awesome segment.
It was awesome. And, and I think we can get lost in the humor a little bit and miss the point. And the point being that, frankly, there is a lot in common. There's a lot that we can start with. And if instead we start with what we disagree with, then we're not going to move anywhere. We have to remember, wait a minute, we share a lot more than we don't. And it is in the sharing that means that we're going to be able to find something else to build on. So, chalk it up to feelings and whatnot. I don't care. I'm in for the long haul. If I get into an argument with somebody and start with the differences and all it does is entrench them further, then I've lost. If I make a social connection with a person where they're like, hey, this guy wasn't, he's a Hillary supporter, but he wasn't a total douchebag. Then 5-10 years from now, he may very well be, maybe not, fully all the way, to where I'm at, but he's going to be a little closer. And that's a little closer is a whole lot better than nothing at all.
That's very true. So some of the other,
off that soapbox.
some of the other topics we were looking at tonight, I wanted to talk about the marijuana vote, right? Because
5 states.
Go ahead.
Oh no, there are 5 states that have it up on legalization this round.
They do, and that's
one of them, California.
exactly why it's interesting because Michigan was supposed to fucking have it on the ballot, and they've been shut down.
Yep.
And I'm having a hard time getting a lawyer to come on the show to talk about this because I just want to. I want a legal standpoint of why we got shut down. We got shut down, and we could talk about a conspiracy about them trying to get rid of us and blah 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 blah. But for me, the big thing is looking at where else is it happening. So it's happening in California, Nevada, Arizona, Maine, and Massachusetts. Now, I'll be honest. We've been so focused on the presidential election, which is more important. I have not looked at how that's done in any of these states. Tomorrow we will, and next week we'll report on it. But they also talked about medicalization of marijuana in Montana, North Dakota, Arkansas, and Florida. Now, to me, this is amazing because no matter who gets into the presidential election, at some point, somebody's got to look at this. If you add 5 more states, if 5 more states actually pass this, and you add 5 more states to the already, I don't know, what is there, like 6 other states with legalization, if you add all those together, you're talking 11 out of 52. Now we're starting to make progress. Now we're starting to move forward. Now we've got conflicts with the federal government. And what the fuck did Obama do for a while? And in all fairness, Obama allowed the federal troops to come in and raid dispensaries in medicalized states. And they did it in Michigan. Aggressively did this in Michigan. And that's disgusting because we could talk about state rights and we could talk about, but I have a bad example. We have a liberal party or a so-called liberal party, a progressive party that allowed for medicalized states who use their state rights, and they raided them. And I have a problem with that. And it's funny because we talk about how we vote, and I'll be honest, marijuana for me is not the deciding issue in who I vote for electorally. Like, we all know Chris enjoys smoking pot. We know this on the show, I mean, we know this. This is not a secret. And we know that I've supported it not just because I enjoy it recreationally, but because of the social infrastructure that it will create in terms of taxation, in terms of the alleviation of imprisoning minorities, in terms of utilizing police dollars to not go after low-end, easy crimes. I worked for an organization that can demonstrate $2.5 million to a city in savings by not going after low amounts of marijuana. I could demonstrate the rise in minority graduation rates. I can demonstrate the rise in college education. We've seen all this. This has all been played out over the last 5 to 6 years. And it's amazing because people wanted to be against it. People wanted to argue about it. People wanted to say, well, fuck this. You just want to smoke pot in the streets and not get fined for it. But there's more reasons than just that. That's a positive. I would like to not feel threatened to go to jail for doing something that does less to my body than alcohol does. But if we look at the social aspects of it, it could revolutionize the world, not just in taxation, but in alleviation in terms of the minority communities, in terms of what the police force gets to use their bias, which we talked about earlier, for. Because they do have that. The police do have bias. They're trained to shoot to kill. They're not trained to shoot to wound. That's not how police are trained. They don't go, yeah, we want you to shoot him in the knee. It's not like Skyrim. You take an arrow to the knee, It's sorry. Video game reference. Google it.
Well, and it's an old saying about getting married, so you're kind of slamming the whole thing about marriage. You took an arrow to the knee, couldn't fight it anymore. Actually, you just got married to a nice lady, and they live in a nice grass hut, and they have babies now.
Well, one of the states that was looking at marijuana, Massachusetts, with half reporting, you've got a 53 to 47 saying yes.
Well, good.
So,
they're all going to need every freaking gram they got after this presidential election.
We're going to need to be very fucking medicated for the next fucking 4 years if this keeps up the way it is.
Well, Washington, Oregon, California, there's a big chunk of stuff that's going to happen there, but even then, man, that's a big number to catch quick.
Yeah. You have the marijuana, and then you have at least, another 6 or 7 states or something like that who are discussing raising the minimum wage as well.
Yes,
to
exactly.
15.
So we are talking a little negative, and I'll be honest, Hannah and I have been drinking quite a bit. David Teachout seems to be pretty sober, but the rest of us here at Cellar Door Skeptics have been drinking a little bit more than we normally would, and it is a little disheartening at 11 o'clock at night to see Trump in the lead. I'll be honest. And not all these are decided. It looks like Ohio just went to Trump, and that's very disheartening. That is very, very disheartening. But
oh man, they called Florida too.
I know, I see it. 197 Trump to 131 Hillary. The Googles are going a little faster than the New York Times, unfortunately.
And so that's fine, right? So I want to stop right there because we have to talk about something positive, though. So you're right, David. There's a lot of positive that's coming out of this. There's a lot of social change that can happen on a state level. Mm-hmm. And, we can argue with the Republicans about state rights, but some of me almost says, well, I have to backtrack a little bit. I have to almost go back and go, well, it looks like people inside of the states are now becoming socially conscious. Should we start including state rights a little bit more than we've taken into account before? Because in all fairness, and Hannah, you can't deny this either, so I can't be the only one crucified for this. You and I have both rallied very heavily against specific state rights because they have the ability to control women's outcomes and what they can do with their body.
Well, yeah.
A lot. And that bothers me a great deal. More than if somebody can fucking smoke pot, personally. But in all fairness, marijuana has been used as a way to hold minorities down for centuries. It's a fact. I mean, we're watching The Get Down right now. Amazing Netflix show, by the way. Go out, Google it, find it. Amazing show.
The hip-hop show, right?
Huh? It's a hip-hop. Yes, it's a hip-hop show.
Well, yeah, I haven't seen it yet, so that's all I know about it.
Yep, and they talk about, and it works with the disco era, but they talk about some of the hardships that are in New York, and they talk about how some of these, large national collusions are creating the issues here. And we see this in the national politics. It doesn't matter what side you are on, there's collusion. Trump has a little bit less that you can push against him because, he is self-funded. He kind of went against the RNC. He's gone out of his way to make sure that he identifies as a Republican, but identifies as a Trump Republican, I guess is the nicest way to say, I want to be racist, but I also want to, make sure that I am pro-life and blah, blah, blah. But if we want to look at that, in the positive side of things, if states are going to change the mentalities, what does that mean for the future of the nation? Does that mean we have 4 parties? Does it mean we have 5 parties? Does that mean we get to see a shift of the momentum in the next 10 years? I hope so.
Well,
I hope we do.
Maybe we can get the states to basically be a little bit less binary, less 0 and 1. We can get the states to all kind of get together and say, hey, we're all cool with this. Fed, you know what? You're going to listen to us for a change. We're all cool with weed. The majority of us are cool with it. We're 100% behind medical. The majority of the country's behind medical. Those types of situations where the states are kind of leading, then the Fed is slowly catching up. Because we've talked about things about when it comes to politics, when you get quick changes. We've talked about this in the past as well, that there are dangerous things about governments that move quickly. It's important for the government to be slow and cumbersome, and you have to kind of drag it along to get it to where you want to go, because fast governments take away rights. They imprison large groups of people. They switch to dictatorships, and they attack other countries when they don't have a bunch of slow-moving parts that we have to keep oiled or regulated. But it takes citizens being involved and participating in the process, and I don't think we have that as much as we could have or have in the past when people were brought up thinking that this is really important. So hopefully, we'll learn a little bit from this that, hey, you kind of got to get involved and pay attention to what's going on. I'm getting told on Facebook right now by a massive stage 1 absolute mega troll who's bounced around the whole time with the Hillary Clinton candidacy, that whenever I critiqued her, that it's my fault that the Trump monster is coming in. So, you know what, Matt, you're a jackass, and I hope you absolutely enjoy every bit of this Hillary failure that it looks like we're going to be dealing with tomorrow morning. We'll see what the West Coast does. We haven't seen anything come from the Washington, Oregons, and Californias yet, so we got a big chunk of votes that could show up there, and hopefully we'll turn these things around a little bit. But right now, it looks like it's going to be state stuff, hopefully being progressive, and possibly another red presidency.
Well, and I don't know. You know, somebody wants to keep going for another hour, Hannah. I do feel that. Like, I feel it's necessary at some point, but at the other side of it, you and I are not going to shift the vote. You, me, and David aren't going to shift the vote. Hell, as much as we love David and his amazingness and his willingness to come put up with our drunken tirades, we're not going to change what's already happening.
Nope.
Nope.
We're spectators here, man.
We are. And the problem I have is I don't want to inundate everybody. I want to at some point tell people, okay, you know what? It is what it is. At some point, you need to figure out what's your happy place. Go find your happy place. And then tomorrow morning we'll all see the difference. And I don't know, because this has been a harder election for me because I'm not the biggest Hillary fan in the whole wide world. It's just not me. But I did vote for Hillary. I want to support Hillary, and I see the social change that could come from a woman president. And to me, and maybe this is me being a little bit too social justice-y, but to me this almost feels like society is not ready to make that social shift from their personal biases. To me, it feels like we're seeing a society that's saying, you know what? I like the status quo better. And I'm not going to tell you Hillary's not status quo, because she is. I'm not going to tell you she's not in bed with politics. Politics, that's a dumb word. She's not in bed with Wall Street. That she's not in bed with all these other things. And I'm sorry if I'm not trying to be sexist and saying she's in bed with, but I'm trying to say is that she has ties to some of these other avenues, right? And I don't know if society's ready to give up enough of their comfort zone to move away from this. I don't know if that's true. I think that sometimes those of us in this movement, those of us that are overly political, that are overly vocal, like Hannah and I and David, that sometimes I think we're more progressive than the rest of society is. And that's why we had David on, is because as much as we want to talk about the psychology and all the different issues about what's going to be predicted, how close it's going to be, all these other things, the best part of this conversation was we got to bring David on to have a conversation about how can we go about changing society moving forward. How do we do that? Because whoever becomes president tonight or tomorrow morning or after contested votes and voter fraud and all sorts of bullshit that's going to get thrown out on both sides, we have to look at how do we move society forward? How do we make humanity better? How do we be able to not just push our agenda, but push an agenda that's fair for the rest of society? And that's the point of this whole discussion tonight. And I know maybe that feels like we're kind of breaking wind with the humor and the pushing of our own agenda.
Fart jokes make this election better.
Alcohol makes this election better. We would have made it even better, but we don't have any of that here. So, but in all fairness, in all seriousness, though, we do have to look at how do we have discussions with people? How can we move humanity forward? And that's what we got to do, because in the morning, no matter who's president,
Obama will be president in the morning for like 70-something days.
God damn it. See, you can't get...
You told me to interrupt, pal.
All right, fair enough. But in all... Damn it, Hannah. In all fairness, somebody's going to be the new electoral decision.
President-elect.
Whatever you want to call it.
That's what it's actually called.
Well, I'm not going to call it that because I'm going to be a dick now just to you.
Stupid reality.
But somebody's going to be that. And we're going to have friends on one side and friends on the other side. And we're going to have colleagues on one side and we're going to have colleagues on the other side. And we're going to have the ability to help people change their viewpoints. and help people figure out what can we do better next time. And if we don't stop and we don't acknowledge that these people are humans just like us, that these people have families just like us, that these people enjoy pleasures, hopefully hockey and, alcohol and, hanging out with their family and their kids as much as we do. If we don't acknowledge that, all we're going to do is isolate them and build that barrier that David was talking about earlier. We're going to build a barrier where it makes it harder for any of us to see the other person as human. And in all fairness, that's the biggest goal of life, right? We could talk about politics all day long, but if there's humans involved and people are being disadvantaged and people are losing their homes and we're disenfranchising them and we're isolating them and we're throwing them over walls like Trump wants to do with his fucking catapult. We're not.
That's right. He's going to build a fucking wall.
We're not going to acknowledge the fact that we do have to live together. And we do have to get along to be profitable. And we do have to get along to keep moving society forward. So my challenge is how can you take the results and not be depressed overall by them, but figure out how can we change society and move it forward. And as we wrap up the show tonight, because in all fairness, we are at 2 hours, and I'm probably a quarter of a bottle of rye whiskey in. And yes, this show is now sponsored officially by Knob Creek Rye Whiskey at 100 fucking proof whiskey going down my gullet. But in all fairness here, let's all go around the room real quick and talk about how do we move society forward? How do we move humanity forward? How do we make, yes, I said it, how do we make life changes for the rest of society? And I'll start with David because he's our guest.
Basically one conversation at a time. I mean, if this goes the way that, we're going to be having a lot of conversations.
Ooh. Interrupting, David. I just want to stop you for a second because I got a 201 to 190 count on Google right now because California just came in with a big fat number.
Yep, California, Hawaii, and Idaho.
All right, continue with whatever meaningful thing you were about to say.
Come on. You interrupted he was having a moment, like a come to Jesus moment.
He can turn that back on. He can turn it back on. That's why he is the Life Weavings director.
That would be true. In a company of one. No, I mean, it really is going to be the conversations that we have moving forward. It's going to be, all the people who are claiming, fine, if Hillary gets elected, we'll hold her feet to the fire. Well, guess what? If Trump gets elected, that's what you're going to have to do here as well. So, regardless of what happens, a lot of the issues that people are passionate about is just simply not going to change. It means that, we go back to doing the things that we should have been doing all along, which is the grassroots relationships. It's the listening to the people who are upset, and instead of dismissing them by labeling them one thing that doesn't agree with us, we find the label that allows us to meet them where they're at and have a conversation. Because if we're not listening, then we're going to keep getting more of these orange people. So there we have it.
I wish the orange people were Martians and we found life on other planets. That would be amazing. All right, well, I'll go next. Really, for me,
Oregon just got called 197 to 201 now.
Dios mío, vaya con democracy. Anyways, for me, for making these things, basically making this whole thing move forward slowly, I like the way David's basically is drawing out the map, is the small changes, the slow one. As Dawkins likes to say it for evolution, is climbing Mount Improbable, going for the slow, gradual, increasing side as opposed to the sharp jump. Because one, it's very improbable that sharp jump could ever happen, which is one of the reasons why we like the evolutionary theory. But when it comes to the political end, it also has to be taken that way. So we're going to take one step forward, 2 steps back a couple of times, and hopefully this will be a 2 steps back, but we'll learn from it. We've talked about restructuring. If the DNC realizes that if it continues to act with the ethical manner in which it did this year, where a lot of people question whether or not it was actually unbiased and wasn't favoring one of the candidates to prevent a populist takeover, just like Donald Trump was for the Republican Party, then maybe they'll restructure and they'll try to listen to the people a little bit more instead of their financiers, so to speak. And so I can only hope that this will be a good push, try to get money out of politics and to get people and their voices in, and maybe we can learn a little bit from what the actual people in this country want, because apparently they want at least a close call between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton right now.
Yeah. In all fairness, I mean, that kind of rounds the show out, right? I mean, we talked a lot. We did. We talked a lot tonight. And I don't want this show to be a downer. Hannah, maybe tomorrow you and I will look back at this and we'll be like, well, fuck, man, we were so depressed tonight.
I know, because Hillary Clinton's only behind by 4 points right now.
She is. You're right. I mean, right now on Google it says 197 to 201. So, there's the gap between there and the variability is not that much. And I don't thank you, Dennis. I don't I love you. I love that.
Everyone's got to hang out in our chat. You'll get all these jokes that nobody's going to know while we're giggling here on live on air.
We chat sometimes and we don't even explain the. So go over to Spreaker.com, find the chat, and next week join in with us 9 p.m. Eastern. But as we wrap the show up and we talk about how do we close this segment of our life out, we have to understand that if we don't move humanity forward and we don't move the way in the direction of changing society, all we're going to do is be at a standstill. And for me, the big thing here is, how do I relate this to my kids in the morning? How do I have this conversation? If Hillary loses, I can't blame Trump. I have to go, you know what, kids, we got to work harder. We got to change people's minds more. We have to be more politically fucking active. Because the one big thing that Joe Elder has always said from Paleo Radio is, you can't stop here, you can't stop now, you got to keep moving, right? So we can't stop here. We got to move. We got to run. We got to change society. And if that means we got to change it one vote at a time, one mind at a time, that's what we're going to do. So Hannah and I are going to be here next week at 9 p.m. Eastern, live on Spreaker, maybe Facebook, but definitely on Spreaker.
We might be more optimistic.
We will definitely be more optimistic to talk about science, how you could change people's minds, where we're going to go, and we'll definitely have a recap of all these election results. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, David Teachout. Sponsor us on Patreon, find us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.
Do, 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 do. Thank you so much, David. Thank you for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure having you on. It was. Thank you, Hannah.
It helped overcome a bit of the anxiety of the last couple hours.
Oh, goodness.
I will grant you that, too, because I the same thing, I'll be honest, I was very calm at work today, right? But at some point, you have to admit that I had a high anxiety of this. There was for me, it was very hard because this is a very tight election, right? And obviously I want my way. And one of the things I don't think we talked about tonight, and in all fairness, we should probably have told the listener this, but one of the things we didn't talk about tonight was the fact that, look at the other side, right? Can't we feel empathy for the other side here? Think about it. If you were in your biases, David, in your biases, think about this. Mm-hmm. And we talk about this. If you were on the opposite of the fence, and you could even if you could recognize your biases that they have to change and you have to branch out more, those people got to feel just as terrible as we would if it was the opposite direction.
Well, yeah.
Absolutely.
And isn't that amazing that, we had a whole show. We didn't even touch on that. We should have touched on that. I guess I feel bad we didn't touch on that. But, it's funny because I'm going to go to bed tonight and I'm going to be very skeptical of what's going to happen, right? But there's people that I know that are the other 50% of the society that are feeling the same way.
Joy right now.
Yeah. In all fairness to that, in all fairness to that, how do we relate that? I don't know. I don't know how to relate that, I guess. I don't know. Maybe you have an answer, David. Come on, you're like the god of this conversation here, fucking psychologist. Hannah, where the hell are you going? Sit your ass down, Hannah.
Well, again, it has to do with searching for the things you have in common. I mean, and they exist. Our experiences are not so diametrically opposite that we can't find something that we're like, oh yeah, even if it's as simple as liking a similar movie or form of music. I mean, for that matter, me and Hannah get along, we're good friends. But even then, there are occasions where I'll pop out something that I appreciate in music, and Hannah's like, wait, you like that too? I mean,
I expect you to listen to polka all the time.
Damn it! Damn it! I love polka too. I'll admit. Oh shit! We're still live. I think we're still live, everyone.
That's fantastic.
Hey, look! Everybody just got a sneak peek into the live of Cellar Door Skeptics. Anyway,
well, good thing we didn't take our clothes off already.
There's no cameras to see it except for David, and David doesn't want to see you naked anyway, Hannah. So, all right. Well, since we went over our time lot, thank you all for joining us. That is a special edition after show of Cellar Door Skeptics. If you like it, send us an email. Tell us if you like this. Maybe we'll do this more often. Maybe we won't. Anyway, we are definitely leaving the vicinity now, and we will see you all next week, next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, to talk science, because we need a break from politics. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Big red button.